asking if the presentation is also being recorded. Yes, it is being recorded. If you want the presentation, just come back to this link. If you want to watch it over again and if you want to share it with other people, definitely come back to this page and you will get this. So we have Ireland in the house. Connor, oh my God, hi. Shannon and Victoria, you're in Portugal. Hi, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Cecile Sabole. Hi, Virginia.
Good morning.
How are you? And
I'm
Katrin, I see you're
fantastic.
as well.
Morning,
Hi.
Katrin.
Hi, good morning, Virginia.
So we're going to start our fireside chat and I'm going to ask you ladies to introduce yourself. We're going to start with Virginia and then afterwards you, Katrin.
Perfect.
Well, good morning. It's lovely to see you all. I'm Virginia Lynn. I'm the Strategic Marketing Content Manager at Subaru of America, based in Camden, New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. We are an automotive manufacturer, an OEM based. Our parent company is Subaru Corporation in Japan. So we are the American arm here. And I currently focus on vehicle advertising and marketing content, specifically for our launch vehicles, as well as updates to our entire car line. That is across a website. It is production for video footage, as well as digital. And we work with our social and influencer teams as well.
Thank you. And Katrin?
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. I think we are a quite international crowd, so very exciting. Like Virginia, I'm located in New York City. I'm the managing director and CEO of TLGG Consulting. We are a boutique consultancy, mostly supporting clients in the transformation in automotive and mobility and healthcare. And I've been working in the last couple of years, particularly on supporting as a supplier, the Ford Automotive Company in their transition to a direct-to-consumer business in the obviously connected vehicle space, but also in the electric vehicle space. So quite an exciting time. In my past, I've also worked on other automotive clients such as Porsche and Mercedes. And so I have a bit of a broader landscape and experience in the field.
That sounds amazing. And I think so many people are going to have questions. So before we'll get into it, please do ask your questions. I'm going to be going through the questions and discussing with the ladies, and they're going to be answering your questions as well. So Virginia, what made you join automotive after a break? What made you come back to automotive?
Oh, that's a great question, Berveleen. So I began my career in automotive on the advertising agency side for an OEM. Also Japanese-based OEM. And I had previously wanted to get into advertising, but wasn't sure which vertical I wanted to land in. However, automotive is an industry that has always fascinated me. My dad actually works in the airline industry. And so just transportation in general is something that I've been fascinated with. So when I had the opportunity to land on an automotive account, I jumped at that chance. I did take a career break, so I want to note to all the women out there that it can be done, and mine was a little extensive. So mine was nearly 6 years that I took off to have 3 little children in a short period of time. And I came back to work and I could not get right back into advertising, so I took a little bit of a different path. What I realized was my heart was still in automotive. And so my goal was to get back to automotive marketing. I didn't know that I would land on the brand side, but I'm very glad that I did.
I'm happy to hear that. Someone asked a question. Oh, we cannot see their family names. Oh, okay, so that was something different. And Katarina asked, what are your companies? So can you put it there? So maybe if you could mention where you worked again, please. And both of you.
Certainly. I work at Subaru of America, and our parent company is the Subaru Corporation in Japan. So we're the American arm.
Perfect. And I, just because my last name is missing, so Katrin Zimmermann, and I'm happy also to share my LinkedIn in the chat if that helps. And I work for TLGG Consulting, which is subsidiary of the Omnicom Group.
Okay, perfect. So just quickly going back to Virginia, because I wanted to ask her another question while we were, in the discussion. And it was during the time where you took your career break to raise some, your children. This is something that a lot of women could be thinking about. They could be feeling nervous or, going back to work. Maybe someone is listening today. What is something that, motivated you to say, okay, I'm going back to do this? I know I asked you about, going back to automotive, but having that courage, what I would say the courage that you had, what really, really gave you that courage? Because I know for a fact, I know somebody who was asking me today about going back to work after having children. They're feeling nervous and not so confident.
It is. I think it's even more difficult as women, probably because we have a harder time getting in and feeling confident in the beginning. And then you take a break and maybe you feel less confident than when you went in. And I know that I certainly had that same challenge. And so for me, I had a desire to ascend in my career before I had children. I just wanted both. I wanted to have a career and a family. And I knew that from a very young age. And so for me to make that decision was a tough one, but I knew that I wanted to come back in. And so when the time felt right, I did make that jump. It did take me a little while to get back into automotive because of the gap that I had had. So I definitely have some tips for women that are re-entering their careers. It was tricky for me to get back in, but ultimately I decided that I needed to get back into automotive because that's what made me feel great about leaving my children for 8 to 9 hours a day. I wanted to do something that I really loved. And even if that meant being away from them, I wanted to do something that was fulfilling to me. So that's why I chose to get back into my career and back into the vertical that I started.
Thank you very much. So, Katrin, I know that you moved from Germany to New York. I moved abroad from the UK to Germany, and even though like an hour's flight, I had a major culture shock.
I bet.
So
I bet.
Yes. And even though I was still in my 20s when I moved abroad, I know you moved abroad when you were older. So how did that feel for you? How did you deal even with the work-life balance in Germany and in the USA? It's so different. So how did you balance that? How did you manage this? And some advice that you'd give for somebody who's thinking of moving abroad, even at an older age?
Well, in general, I can only recommend it, and I agree with you. It's a huge challenge, no matter where and how you're going. And I think it doesn't really matter which age stage you're at. I was fortunate to actually have lived in the US the first time when I was 16 as an exchange student in Oklahoma, which is somewhat different than the New York life I'm living now. But so I had a bit of an understanding of general American culture. Nevertheless, when I moved to the US, I pretty quickly learned that, one of the things, and you might have experienced that as well, Berveleen, Germans get straight to business pretty quickly.
Yes.
And that is something that I think we particularly also find in the automotive space. It's, it has these kind of straightforward language, and everything is to the point. It's very oriented around creating impact and moving things forward. And I find while that is, moving things forward and creating impact is very true in the US as well, I feel there's a lot of building context and building relationship in the beginning of starting and embarking on joint business journeys. So that was probably one of the biggest things that I had to learn. And the second component, I would say, that was a challenge is to understand that when an American says in a business context, this was great, and let's have a follow-up conversation, it doesn't necessarily mean that there will really be a follow-up conversation. It's a nicer way to say no. In German, you would kind of, get that in a bit more of a straightforward sense, or maybe that is even an expected first no, and then you have to push a little bit to get things going. So I think that it was the biggest change in business context and behavior. What I used at the time in order to kind of get acquainted to, I gave myself a few ambitions, let's say, to first of all try to build a local network of Americans as friends, because it's very easy if you move to such a big city like New York to still stay in the German cycle of friends and build that friend group. So I moved here with the clear intent of building an American network and understanding myself to be more in that social environment. And to say yes to all of the invites that I got in the first year, to kind of, adopt a little bit that lifestyle of being more optimistic and forward thinking and a little less risk averse. I kind of jumped into the pool, and I would say these were the two traits, besides some good cultural training and understanding, that made me feel at home in that sense, in this culture, very quickly. Okay, that is great. I think we have very similar, experiences, even though I think it's harder to make friends in Germany than in the USA. I believe so. I believe so. I would love to hear your experience at some point. I imagine it's not as easy. We are also quite a closed culture in that sense. I think Americans are more open and inviting. Yeah, I think after 8 years in Germany, I think I'm starting to feel like it's home. So that took a long time, so you can only imagine. So we're going to answer a question. Oh, sorry. They say it takes 10 years to become a New Yorker. So I have a few more years left to actually get to that point. Oh, okay, that's okay. So we're going to answer some questions. And this one was directed at Virginia. It's from Mukuzema Johnny. It says, what were some of the challenges you had after taking a career break? And did you have to upskill yourself and take a pay cut?
That's a good question. I didn't even think about the pay cut one. That would be tricky to see. Pay cut, as far as numbers are concerned, no, but I had been out for about 6 years. So if you adjusted for inflation, I'm not quite sure. But no, I did not need to take a pay cut. The challenges that I faced were that I had moved to a new location. And so I did not have my circle and my network. If I had stayed where I had left my career, I believe I could have very easily gone back to my company. And when I called my previous employer, at that time, remote work was still not prevalent for them. And they noted I would need to move to their closest office, which wasn't an option at that time. So I do believe that moving to a new location and not having that network did present itself as a hurdle for me to overcome, because I didn't have anyone locally that was vetting me. So what I did was I reached out to my network, and I had my LinkedIn page flooded with recommendations. And I think that the relationships that you built, and Katrin, you touched on this earlier, are vital, because even though I had not been working for close to 6 years, the work that I had done was so strong, and the connections that I made were so strong that even 6 years later, my colleagues were willing to go to bat for me on LinkedIn and say, this is what she did, this is what she accomplished. That helped a little bit. But really, overall, it was being in a new market, not having been in a brick and mortar company within 5 years, and not having anyone locally to vet me. That was probably my biggest challenge. And I think that companies didn't want to take a chance on someone that hadn't been in a brick and mortar company and had just been raising children. Now, again, I mean, we're talking, this is 7 years ago, about 7 years ago. So I think the vibe has changed, and I think the pandemic certainly opened up a lot of eyes, and there are opportunities now for women, but it was tricky for me to jump back in.
Yes, I can imagine. We also have another question for you, and I think I can pose this to both of you actually, and it's to talk more about your work. So I'll start with you again, Virginia, since you're here already. So can you shed some light on the scope on new age technologies like EV, connectivity, connected vehicle, vehicle have for female parts? What piece of advice would you give a mid-career woman? I think both of you can answer this. Did you understand that, or should I ask again?
I definitely understood the first part. I think the latter part was a little fuzzier, but I'd love to pose it to Katrin, because I think she's more of an expert in this area than I am, if that's okay.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Well, I also got the first part. Would you mind just reframing or getting us the second part of the question again?
I think it's mainly of working in EV and connectivity as a woman, if I think so. Jui, if you could ask that question again, but we're gonna just answer it. If you could talk about the EV and connectivity.
Absolutely. So for me, I think it's one of the exciting times for women to embark into this field. I mean, in general, we know the automotive field women are somewhat underrepresented from an equity and equality perspective in automotive, but the transition and the changes that we're seeing in the automotive field, in my opinion, actually bear a great opportunity for women to embark in, particularly the connected vehicle component, which allows automotive manufacturers, or actually requires automotive manufacturers, to go closer in direct to consumer opportunities, hence creating some of these opportunities for women in fields where maybe we are stronger in the side. Till this day, still 80% of all consumer decisions are done by women, or consumption decisions are done by women. So we naturally have a good understanding of, what do consumers want, how are they operating, how do we in automotive build these relationships that might be lasting in ecosystems. And through the transition, I think that's the second component of great opportunity for women to be playing in automotive and positioning themselves in the field, because transition always requires to build that strategy and move from point A to B, but you're moving people and you need to take people along. And I think that is something that we as women can deeply embark on as well. And then thirdly, I would encourage anyone and everyone to go in these very exciting fields of data analytics and connectedness and technology that are fields where we see more and more companies going into, and the automotive field or mobility in general is just the first one to really go in at scale and be consumer facing in that sense. And so for us as women, it's a great field to explore and drive our own career forward. So I would encourage everyone, even if you traditionally have no experience in the field, put yourself out there and go for these jobs, because they're great opportunities to stimulate mobility and how we share mobility moving forward.
You reminded me of something that we discussed with Virginia, where she mentioned, I'm going to ask you to say this again, the male, you have to come and say the male. We don't say male dominated anymore. And Virginia has this amazing way of phrasing it and putting it into words. And I'd really love for you to tell everybody watching, how you said it and how you changed it.
Oh, certainly. I think Katrin spoke so eloquently on the opportunities for women to step into this space as it's rapidly advancing towards EV and connected business. I do want to give a little plug. Our connected business department here at Subaru is led by a fierce female leader, Amy Strignoli, and there are very strong women on that team. And we know that the car is now being considered the third space and is now this opportunity for entertainment and connectivity. And I'm very excited to see what the opportunities are as we step in. As many of you may have seen this week, Subaru Japan, as well as Subaru of America, have made some key executive decisions, and we have new leadership. And so we are fiercely headed into the EV space as well. So I invite a lot of women on this call, if you are near the New Jersey area, to pop on and see if there are opportunities for you at Subaru. To get to your note, Berveleen, about the male-dominated terminology, I think that's one that's been used often. And as we think about how language shapes us as a society, I'm a big proponent of storytelling, and the words that you use really influence the way you think about things. And the word male-dominated to me has this negative connotation. And just because a lot of men choose to come into this field, and it is largely, a lot of the positions are held by men, to me it's male populated. There just happen to be more men in this industry than women-aided. But when you put the word dominated on it, it just, for me, gives us this negative connotation that I just don't prefer to use. So I've just used the word populated. It's a male-populated industry, and that may change in the future. Another term that I've tried to coin here at Subaru is the term womaning, which is we typically have these terms that have come along with us for years. And one of them is manning, like, oh, someone's manning that project. Oh, someone's leading that. And that word is, like, or manpower or man hours. That's going to take a lot of man hours, right? So here at Subaru, we say, oh, it's going to take a lot of people hours. It's going to take a lot of human hours. So we're mindful about the language we're using. And so in the marketing department, several of us are starting to use the word womaning, which is to give credit to the women in our departments who are leading these projects and saying, oh, Jess, she's womaning that project. That's hers. And I don't know if it'll catch on, but it is language that we use here at Subaru that we're very intentional with.
I really like that. And since you brought that to my attention, I have now been womaning my things. I have been womaning everything, and I have been spreading the word. So I think that's really the quote that I'm going to take with me today. So could you tell us a bit more about how you got into your role? Maybe there could be somebody that, piggybacking off Katrin was saying that there's so many roles in automotive, you're not always thinking about tech. So as I mentioned earlier, I did mechanical engineering, and for some reason I thought the workplace was just going to be me fixing things, and no, not at all. It's not like that. So I'm mainly in technology, and I really, really, really enjoy my job, Could you let us know how you got into your career and maybe what your day-to-day looks like?
Yeah, Katrin, do you want to take that one first?
Happy to. So mostly in the automotive space or with consulting in automotive, it's the day-to-day is typically filled with discussions around the subject of what and how is the business changing, and how can we build better and new customer experiences in the context of the brands that we're working for. How do we leverage data insights? How do we leverage cultural insights? How do we leverage market insights and competitive insights to then build strategies and execute them accordingly to position our clients within the field, and then ideally do so with significant business impact? So that's a very broad perspective. For example, I can give you a particular example. We are doing a lot of testing of new mobility solutions with our clients in certain geographical areas or for certain target audiences. And oftentimes that it revolves around subjects such as sharing mobility or electric vehicle sharing, and new forms of somewhere in between renting and leasing. And so we're really helping. What does it mean when we're changing from the classical business model that we previously held, where we sold a car to a dealer and then the dealer sold to the consumer and held that relationship, to what does it mean, for example, when we launch a small neighborhood electric vehicle service in a city and then test how are consumers reacting to that? What is a go-to-market strategy? How do we win customers and how do they come back? What does the app look like that we launch with this product? What is the differentiating factor? So some of these things we are all thinking about, and then how do we bring them to life? So we're not only strategizing about the task, but then also executing them with our client in certain geographies with the best impact possible. And what we are trying to do is also think through how are different industries correlating with learnings from each other, because we might find other industries that are going into connected smart products as well and other things. And what does that maybe mean for the automotive industry in how to set themselves up from an infrastructure perspective, but also how to set them up in the day-to-day from a go-to-market perspective. So it's a very broad range of activities that we cover. Most of the time it is around a question that the client comes with and says, I'm understanding that there's a market opportunity. People are more moving, for example, into not buying a whole vehicle, but rather wanting to own a part of it, which is a general trend that we see in ownership. What would be our approach as a company, and how do we best find a solution in the white space in the market that we can build a business within that? So that's the general day-to-day. We do that for a multitude of clients. I think some of the bigger themes of subjects is really moving from car ownership to car sharing as one subject. And the second one is really moving into what does it mean when we truly become an electrified nation in the US, and electric vehicle utilization. And we can look to, for example, Europe, who's a bit more mature in electric vehicle rollouts. What does that mean? How do we bring that also to more rural areas? How do we mitigate and manage range anxiety, which seems to be a bit of a thing? But also, what does that mean when, for example, for the first time we see bidirectional charging and having a multitude of, empty or available batteries for energy storage on our streets? How does that change our grid? What are all of these second order effects that we have to anticipate? So it's a very wide range of questions that we concern ourselves with.
That is very wide. And I think if somebody wanted to get into that industry, they would have so many opportunities and so many choices. So thank you very much. And then Virginia, how does your day-to-day look?
Katrin's explanation, she's got such a fascinating role. I don't know that mine is as interesting, but where I spent the last 18 months here at Subaru was focused primarily around our brand equity, in that our Subaru Love Promise is something that's very near and dear to our organization. And as a part of that Subaru Love Promise, we have the Subaru Share the Love event annually, which is our year-end event. But rather than give away wonderful incentives to our customers, we give our customers the opportunity to have a donation made on their behalf through Subaru to their local charities or national charities. And so in the last 15 years through the Share the Love event, we've donated over $250 million. So a big part of what I came into Subaru to achieve was to continue to grow that campaign and ensure that our customers have the ability to understand exactly how much we care about the things that they care about. We're very close to our owners and their interests. And so the Subaru Love Promise is something that I was really honored to be a part of and help market what that means to us. In this new role, of which I'm about a little bit over a month in, it is the vehicle side of the house. So I've got a little bit of onboarding to do. And I did want to mention that to Berveleen, to all the women on the call, that just because there is a role that you may not be 100% sure that you can accomplish today does not mean that you should not apply for that role. There are opportunities in this industry to grow and to learn. And as Katrin mentioned earlier with the EV and the connected business, this space is ever evolving and we're all learning. And so I'm learning in this new role exactly all of the areas of responsibility that this new role has and the new team that I'll have working alongside of me. So I'm very excited. Primarily, this role is the vehicle launch advertising creative. So thinking through the new vehicles that we have upcoming and how important they will be to our consumers and what features will be important and the advances that we've made and how to creatively express that through storytelling and through visual creative.
I think from what I picked from both of you is everybody can utilize their skills. They can use whatever skill they have and put it towards their job. I read a paper, it's in the statistics that, from what you just said, Virginia, that men are more likely to apply for a job that they're not even qualified for compared to women. So this also goes back to salary negotiations, that men are more likely to negotiate compared to women and all these topics. So I think this platform is a very good place for us to come together, share our ideas, and really encourage each other to do well and to, uplift each other. So because of our time, I do have to go to the last few questions and we'll wrap it up. We have one from Tracy Chuku. It says, how would you advise young Black women who struggle with perfectionism, especially because Black women in automotive are underrepresented and sometimes underappreciated? Okay, that was a question to me. So Perfectionism. I would say I am probably also a perfectionist, but I am working towards relaxing and understanding that I am enough, and also learning from the ladies that are here today. They are really inspirational, teaching other young girls. As I mentioned earlier, that automotive Women in Automotive Network has a mentorship program mentoring people. And being underrepresented is why I do what I do. It's why I help people, why I speak up, or why I'm a very bubbly person, and I'm a person who's very confident in what I do. So if I walk into a room and I feel like I'm by myself, I will never feel uncomfortable. I really just try and power through, because another little girl would see me and they would be like, oh, okay, I'm represented. So it's motivating. So getting my face out there. I have social media. I do a lot of speaking about automotive technology. So that's why I do what I do, so that somebody can see a familiar face. So yeah. I'm going to ask you this, Katrin, because you moved to New York. How do you manage with, moving from Germany and then moving over there? How did you, we spoke about moving abroad. How do you manage yourself being there as an expat?
Well, I might connect with the previous question, because I have to say I worked with and for some wonderful women, and also some fantastic Black women in the automotive field, who are super expert on their subject and are really driving, and the force of driving the automotive industry forward in its innovative thinking, but also in its inclusion and perspective to create seats at the table for a multitude of stakeholders. And I think that can be nicely leveraged in how did I move myself into the spaces here, and how did I create openness. It's really to push yourself a little bit to be more open to taking these seats at the table and making sure that you are in the room and showing up. So creating a little bit of that self-confidence and bringing that up, and being of support and of help in no matter which community you're in, whether that's an expat community, whether that's in the work community, whether that's in the workspace. I think sometimes we as women learn early on to not take too much space in a room. And it goes a little bit also back to your study that you were talking about. Men apply to a job when they fulfill 30% of the criteria. Women only consider applying when they at least fulfill 70% of the criteria. And I think looking and learning from the people around us, whether that's our male colleagues, our female colleagues, people who identify in a totally different way, looking at what everyone has to bring to the table and how you can add to that on the one hand side, but also see where you can learn from others. Because to me, in work and in any space that you're at, it's always about the dialogue and the interaction that you create, and the benefit that you can create together, mutually for oneself, but also for the companies, the clients, the community that you're working with and within.
I like that. I really like when you said, take up space. So I was like, okay, that's really...
Yeah, don't be afraid to take up space, right? You do not always have to have the answer. And I think we live in a time where no one truly has the answer. We are in a bit of an exploratory field. We're not fully clear on what's the true business model of shared mobility. Is that going to be beneficial? How can we truly transition to electric? Do we have all of the rare ingredients to stimulate battery utilization across, the globe? Like, is everything ready for what we're anticipating the future to be? It's being built together. So let's just, as women, participate in the building for the better of all.
I totally agree. Would you like to add something, Virginia?
Going back to the note about Black women and perfectionism, certainly I can't speak from that space, but I can share that we have some wonderful initiatives here at Subaru. In fact, just today appointed to the Associate Director of DEI and B is Ashley Estes, who I had the pleasure of working alongside here in the marketing department at Subaru. So there are certainly corporations that are looking to make great strides in this space. And I do believe a woman, particularly a woman of color, making sure that your connections are strong and really ensuring that people know who you are and what you're capable of. Is I do find that oftentimes those positions that are open, people have other people in mind for those. And if you build your connections and they're strong, you will have an advocate in the room for you. And I think perhaps that could take away from that need for perfectionism. And some of us have that. After having 3 children, I often tell myself, like, I can't be perfect anymore. It's just not possible. I only have so many hours in the day. But we at Subaru here are certainly working towards creating those opportunities. We have wonderful programs here. We have Girls Inc. that we mentor with. Again, Berveleen, you had mentioned this, about like what young girls would look up to, Black women and say, wow, like they're in this career, they're making strides, they've got a seat at the table, they've got a voice at the table. And do you feel welcome? Being in an organization that makes you feel welcome and that feels like you belong is really important. So making sure that you align with a company that has those morals and values that align with your own.
That's a massive key. I actually wanted to say that later on, to say that I feel so lucky because the company that I work for right now, I feel very comfortable. I don't walk into the building and feel different. So what you mentioned, that it's very important to also be in an environment where you feel very welcome and appreciated. We'll take one more question and then we will do one piece of advice. So I'm going to ask both of you ladies, if you had one piece of advice to give to the audience, what you would give them. So we'll answer the question first. So Yasmin asks, there's always a strong man behind a woman's success and vice versa. Hence, how do you position yourself and grow in that space despite the odds? And what are the odds, if I may ask?
I'm sorry, was the first part that there's a strong man behind a successful woman, or is there a strong woman behind every successful man?
She mentioned there is there's always a strong man or a strong woman behind one another.
Oh, I may dispel that if I could. So I've been a single mom for the last 7 years, and I came back into my career 7 years ago. And I had me, myself, and I to push myself forward. So I could say maybe I had 3 strong little guys who needed me to push me forward. But no, only recently have I found a wonderful partner who has been there to support and push me forward. But before that, no, it was myself. And I needed to find childcare, and I needed to call in favors, and I needed to figure out how to get to different places. So I've been a full-time single mom of 3 small children working for the last 7 years. So I might dispel that. What I think you need is, I think you need a good life coach. I think you need to find folks who are thought leaders that you really align with. For me, it's like Simon Sinek, Arianna Huffington, Mel Robbins, a few others that I really take a beat and say, you know what, I need to take a break, or I need to listen to a podcast, or I need to reset. But I do think that with that type of a mental health care package that you create for yourself, you can push yourself forward. So that would be my comment.
I like that.
I would support that perspective. I think it's wonderful if you have someone of any type of gender that is supporting and having your back. But I think that can be any person, and that can be even your children that give you energy. I think it's very much for me personally about how do I manage my energy, and how do I try to bring positivity in that energy to the world, and how do I build my circle and my community and the people around me who we are building energy, positive energy upon and with each other. And I think that's where I would go. I've also been when I moved to the US, that is not always easy for a woman in a relationship. So I've been single for a very long time here and been doing a lot of things on my own. I truly do believe that if you look inward, you have a lot of the power within you to create a good life and to bring this, opportunities that you have as an individual to life. So I'm very much with Victoria. I think you found two people in the field of automotive who've kind of embarked on that journey for a long time, also as warriors on their own. Warriors might be a strong word, as adventurers on their own. And so I think it's wonderful to have someone. It's not always a must. There's so much power and energy within yourself. I think it's just super important, how to harness that power.
Yeah, I really, oh, sorry.
I just wanted to also say mentorship, right? Mentor,
yes.
Find a mentor program. I do believe that the Women Automotive Network has a mentor program. Oftentimes you'll find mentor programs within your own organization. Align yourself with other individuals who have been there before. And I think in this time, in this era, post-pandemic, empathy and bringing your whole self to work are components that we didn't normally have 15 years ago. And Katrin, you may be able to speak to that as well, as I think we've been in the industry about the same time. But bringing your whole self to work oftentimes means that you do find community within the folks that you work with. And so I do think that you can find programs, you can find employee resource groups, you can find advisors, even within your own organization, that can help to propel you in your career.
And I think it also goes back, not just in your career, I think everything adds up. It also adds up even in your private life, and it all comes together. So having good people around you, people that are mentoring. I also believe in life coaches. I am so on board with this. So it's something that I totally agree with. So everybody watching, I really recommend to take the advice that we're having today. And one piece of advice, the last thing you want to say to everybody before we say goodbye. What is one statement that you want to say to everybody watching right now?
I'm happy to start. I would say stay curious, because the industry is in the middle of tremendous change, and the change will continue for the next 10 to 15 years. Curiosity will enable you to manage and mitigate that change in favor for yourself, for the industry, for the community that you're in, because mobility is such an important resource for us to, evolve economically speaking, but also to connect people. And so I think it's a fascinating industry to be in, and curiosity will help you drive that industry forward for all of us.
Thank you.
For me, I would say really take the information that you have at the time to make the best decision that you can at that moment. It is sometimes a desire for us to want to plan out our career and define what those rungs are going to be. I didn't know that I would have had 5 missing rungs on my ladder when I started my career. So I needed to take a different path. And so what I had at the moment, and the information I had at the time, and the kind of competing priorities that I had to make a decision. And you have certain information, there are opportunities that arise, and you have to go with what your gut is, and you can't look back. So instead of trying to plan out your career rung by rung, really just do the best that you can in your current role and continue to be open to opportunities, because you never know when they're going to jump out at you.
I love that. I would just finalize to say there's room for everybody. Be more confident in yourself and love yourself a bit more. You will discover quite a lot when you love yourself a bit more. So on that note, I want to say thank you so much to our speakers. If you guys could please put hearts in the comments. Thank you so much to our sponsors. Thank you for everyone who joined. If you want to watch the link again, want to watch this event again, please do just visit the link, the LinkedIn page again, and it will be live. So thank you so much to everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.